Hey guys, it's Miss West Social Studies class and we're talking about the Atlantic slave trade. Now, this isn't everything that we're going to learn about the Atlantic slave trade. It's just a brief overview of our notes and we'll get into more details later on. So, the colonization of the Americas led to a forced migration of African people to the Americas as slaves, meaning they don't necessarily want to go to the Americas. They're being forced to go to the Americas. Plantation colonies in the Americas need labor because they are growing boatloads of cash crops. So they need people to work the fields. So they're like, who can we get to work these fields? Well, first they're thinking the natives. So they enslave the native people, but they die of European diseases like a cold. And then also natives, they're pretty good about their surroundings because, you know, they've lived there forever, so they can easily run away. So then the Europeans try to get indentured servants to work on these plantations. They basically try to convince European people that they should agree to work for a set number of years on a plantation in exchange for a free trip to the Americas. Most people did not want to do that. So they start purchasing African slaves from the western coast of Africa. At least 25 African kingdoms took part in the slave trade. It's said that they tried to sell criminals, debtors, and prisoners of war to Europeans. Not all were criminals, but that's what they wanted to say. So the religion of Islam is increasing during this time, and the Quran says that you cannot enslave other Muslims. So as more and more people are converting to Islam, the Arab traders have to venture to other areas looking for slaves. And so the Arab traders start trading guns and horses to Africans in exchange for African slaves. Cabosiers are Africans, and they're African officials, and they're basically dealers between Europeans and think of like the African governments or African officials. And they would trade African slaves for guns, cloth, and manufactured goods, things they wanted from Europe. Portugal brought slaves to Brazil to work on the sugar plantations. Then all of a sudden they're making sugar like crazy and they're able to bring this sugar to Europe and sell it for tons and tons of money because they like their tea over there. Here's the triangular trade just to review. So up here we have Europe and they have guns, cloth, manufactured goods. Not like really factories yet though. And then down here we've got Africa and slaves. Over here, we have cash crops. So guns, cloth, manufactured goods comes down here. They trade them for slaves. Slaves go across the Middle Passage to work on these plantations, and then all of these cash crops are brought over here to Europe. The Middle Passage is the passageway from Africa to the Americas. It's when the slaves are on board these ships, packed in horrible, horrible conditions. About 50% of the Africans die on their way to the Americas, or that's the estimate. Here you can see like how packed in they are to the ship. This is just like a diagram kind of showing like they didn't have any room. They packed as many people in as possible. And of course they're treated inhumanely, like product or cattle. People that revolted would be thrown overboard, or if they died, they would also be thrown overboard. So it's also hard to estimate how many people were actually on these ships and how many people died. Historians believe that approximately 11 million Africans were transported to the Americas. This is going to have a horrible effect on Africa because, first of all, their population is going to decrease dramatically. It's also going to cause more warfare among the tribes because they're going to take the prisoners of war and sell them to Europeans for guns, cloth, manufactured goods, and money. Many African slaves in the Americas resisted slavery. Some formed runaway communities like the Maroons in Jamaica. And of course, there are also revolts on slave ships and on plantations. Unlike other types of slavery seen throughout history, African slaves are never able to return to Africa, and they're never able to earn their freedom. So also their children are born into slavery and remain slaves. In 1807, the Atlantic slave trade was abolished, meaning we don't have slaves being transferred out of Africa and into the Americas anymore, but slavery still existed in the Americas until it was abolished in 1865 by the 13th Amendment. So that is the overview of the African slave trade, but we're going to get a ton more information as we go through this unit. That's it for today. Have a good one.